I don't think any of us really love the UFC Apex. You know what I mean? Of like, I really do like that we get weekly fights and that we have constant, exciting matchups with meaningful contenders, and that's really cool. But the energy of the Apex is passable. And I know some people have actually pushed back against me, that some of the people there and the trainers and stuff like this have said that some of the energy in those UFC Apex events have been outstanding. They said they have 200 people there and it feels like 20,000. Well, that's still not a supportive argument, is it? When you could just be in a 20,000 people arena. And it really does surprise me that there isn't some venue in Las Vegas, some casino who wants the foot traffic, that they don't sponsor these UFC events and say, like, give the Mandalay Bay Event Center or the MGM Grand weekly UFC events. Because the reason that there's so many great events and so many exciting fights in Vegas is because the casinos really sponsor it. And for context, back in the day, 10, 12 years ago, whatever it might have been, the Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather fight was going to be at Cowboy Stadium, but instead one of the major casinos in Las Vegas stepped in and offered more money. And the reason is because you got 20,000 people possibly staying at your hotel, but you got 20,000 people probably gambling, plus media people, plus there's 20,000 people at the event, but there's more people, being in the city for that. You got more people in the casinos. So if you want foot traffic, you would want it at some casino. Like, the casinos want that foot traffic. So I'm really surprised that they continue to do it at the UFC Apex when you could just have like some back room. Maybe there's 3,000 people at some casino, but that's 3,000 people with foot traffic, because I would have figured that the casinos really wanted it. Of course, we started at the UFC Apex during COVID, and that was an amazing idea. Love that idea. I think that was absolutely brilliant. But at this point, it has not been COVID for like 4 years, and it is just not exciting anymore. Even like the fighters feeding off the energy, the viewers feeding off of the roar of the crowd, but even the commentators come off as a little bit low energy sometimes. And you never want your product to feel like, oh, this is just another flavor of the week or another thing this week. You want it to always feel like a very important event that's happening. And it feels like, unfortunately, with the UFC Apex, it's just, here's this week's offering. You're tuning in because of the 3 letters on it, not because of the people on it. And, however, the fights this week from the UFC Apex were brilliant. There were some really exciting fights, some exciting knockouts and submission, and some great back and forth wars, and some fights that had huge implications for the future of their divisions. Let's start at the top and work our way down. You're able to get Caio Borralho was able to defeat Gerald Cannonier by unanimous decision and looked very dominant doing it. This was a really exciting one. Caio Borralho is a really interesting guy, unbeaten in the UFC in his run so far. Last week I did say that he is one to keep an eye on, and that this is going to be a coming out party for him. And that's exactly what happened. This was a big moment, a main event slot, where he was able to put his name, really leave a major impression on the world of MMA, and he rose to the occasion. And he looked good doing it. Caio Borralho, really cool, interesting past. He is the fight nerd, but he has something like a degree in biochemistry or something along those lines. And this guy is such a bro. Like, if you painted a picture of what do you think a Brazilian, like, bro-y playboy looks like? He's got these neck tattoos. He's got this giant jaw. He says he's a nerd, but yeah, he's got a degree in biochemistry or whatever it is. He says he's a nerd, but man, that guy's a playboy, I bet. But also, he was offered major jobs in beer, apparently, which is so cool. Oh man, like, this is what I'm saying. Could this guy be any cooler? And he's got beer jobs. He's got a chin that looks like a superhero. He's got fighting acumen. Anyway, so he's got a black belt in judo and jiu-jitsu. He started, I believe, in Muay Thai when he was a little bit younger. And he just keeps expanding his skill set. And being the fighting nerd from the fight camp, the fighting nerds, he's a very intelligent fighter. And you see that coming out during his fights, because he has a lot of skills that I really like. And I would like more MMA fighters to show some of these skills as well. And he's facing Gerald Cannonier, who was a perpetual top contender. He's been in and out of the top 5, top 10 kind of range. He's a very good fighter who started a little bit later, but has extremely good physicality, extremely good aggression. He's a very intelligent fighter, and he always has crystals as his backup. And that's a really powerful tool to have. Dan Hardy, Gerald Cannonier, these people have more title shots than you do. They have a better MMA record than you do. And they swear by the power of crystals. So you can't argue with that. I mean, a lot of people have different faiths in whatever. Having faith in crystals is no different than faith in other stuff. Anyway, let's move forward into the fight itself. You had it was supposed to be a classic Southpaw versus Orthodox matchup, and that's not exactly the way it went. It was mostly Southpaw versus Orthodox, but both men were switch. So you quite often had closed side or open side from the other side. But yeah, most of this match did have open side. And what Caio Borralho was doing was the very good Southpaw tactics as the person who is the Southpaw and has a size advantage in that he's always looking for lead hand control and looking to step out to the closed side, essentially where his opponent's shoulder is, and then to land strikes from there. And Gerald Cannonier did have a lot of success landing punches. He went over the shoulder quite a bit, and then he landed hooks to the open side as well. And Caio Borralho was controlling early, looking really, really good. And Gerald Cannonier was able to rally back a couple of times with strikes like that. And Caio Borralho was able to make adjustments midway through the fight. And that's a great thing to see. So that hook over his shoulder was landing over and over again. So he changed a couple of different things. And that was mainly adjusting so that he was always ready to shoulder roll. So he had the timing wrong before, and Gerald was essentially throwing over the jab. So he was adjusting against that, and you saw the shoulder roll. He also changed the initiation. So he never, when you start looking at rounds 3, 4, and 5, Caio Borralho was never engaging in exchanges that he did not initiate. Before, he was mostly initiating exchanges, but it was a little bit mixed, and if he didn't initiate the exchange, he would happily throw with Gerald Cannonier. But after rounds 3, he would only engage in exchanges that he initiated. But the story of this fight, the move that really stuck out, was that jab. Oh, that jab was a work of art from Mr. Caio Borralho. This guy. So he does a couple different things with that jab. It's lightning fast. It's pinpoint accurate. His timing is amazing. He goes right in between the guards. And then he built off of it as the fight went on. So he's throwing tons of feints. Sometimes it's just a jab. Sometimes it's a jab, and then he adds the 1-2 right after it. Jab 1-2, 1-2. Just always varying what's going on. And his knockdowns came because of that. And it was just so good. I love a good jab, whether we're talking Muay Thai, kickboxing, boxing, or MMA. The jab is the most important strike that you can throw in a fight. And Caio Borralho has it. Now, what he does a little bit different than a lot of fighters in MMA, and I think other fighters should take note of this, is that he keeps his lead hand pretty low. It is parallel with his chest. And what that does is that lead hand, rather than being up by his head and ready to block, it's a little bit lower down by his chest so that it is always directly facing his opponent. It is only, a foot away from landing the jab? And sometimes it's not always going to be powerful, but it's already halfway landed already. And he just holds it out there. But, of course, the downside of this is that you have less guard on that left side, on your lead side, sorry, not your left side, your lead side. And that's why Gerald Cannonier was able to land so many hooks going over the top of the shoulder, is that you have to be ready to shoulder roll because you have no block on that side anymore. And the jab varied quite a bit. So the adage, of course, for centuries in boxing is to keep your feet under you. And a lot of the skills in boxing are learn this skill to be good. And then to be great, you have to break all of those skills, right? So don't ever do X, Y, and Z. Don't do those. But then you see Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao and Muhammad Ali. They all break the standard rules and do X, Y, and Z. But first, you have to master the basics, and that is keep your legs under you. What Caio Borralho was doing, a lot of his jabs were leaning forward at the shoulders just to get that little extra pop on it so it's a little bit faster. And then for the 1-2, he would have his legs back under him again. But if you're just learning how to strike and trying to learn the basics, don't worry about that kind of mastery technique. Just focus keeping your legs under you. And then once you master that, you can start breaking the rules. But Caio Borralho's jab was so good. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, and the timing on Gerald Cannonier's attacks were really, really good. He knew when to push back against his opponent because Caio Borralho was really quick on his feet. He was floating in and out. He would go back to the cage and then circle out and be able to take the center and begin pressuring from there, and that's very skilled. But if you are a fighter who is floating around the ring or the octagon or whatever it might be, You are floating around, but to throw strikes, you have to set your weight down into your stance. But if you are floating around, you have to set down in your stance to throw punches. You can't be floating and throwing punches at the same time. You have to set your feet into your striking stance, or you can stay in your striking stance the entire time. Someone who's in and out of their stance all the time was like Alistair Overeem at heavyweight for a little bit, Dominic Cruz a little bit. They were in and out of stances. Someone who's always in their stance and ready to throw down. Maybe a Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She was really good at that. Chuck Liddell's always in his stance. Not the best stance, but he's always in his stance kind of thing. So anyway, if you're floating around and then he sets his feet into his stance and ready to throw, that's when Jared Cannonier was throwing back and landing with much success. So what Caio Borralho was doing was making sure he was landing the jab first, initiating exchanges, not letting his opponent work off counters, not letting his opponent initiate, but always smothering, always pushing, and he had incredible success. Just an absolutely awesome stuff. Caio Borralho, wide karate stance, really impressive timing. Jared was trying to pummel, but didn't have a ton of success with that. He did land over the shoulder. I love that sharp jab so much. What else do we got here? Pivots out to center. Oh, quite often he was framing off. So you have a guy at 185 who is jabbing well. He is punching and pivoting off. He is framing and pivoting to center. Like those are some sharp skills at 185 that is going to give genuinely any of these top 185ers problems because they are just so good. Those skills are proven to work over and over again. A long southpaw striker who is jabbing and pivoting. He's framing and pivoting off. Come on, that is such good stuff. He's shoulder rolling on top of it. That's good stuff right there. Let's talk about the controversial ending of this fight where Jared Cannonier was knocked down. Solid 1-2. Bop, bop. Super fast, super strong. Turned his head across like that. And then he fell back and bounced off the cage. So if the cage wasn't there, he would have bounced his head off the mat. And a lot of people were saying the fight could have been stopped there. He went down and Caio Borralho was landing a series of punches against him and, trying to protect himself. Jared Cannonier was trying to protect himself. So a lot of people said it was a bad stoppage and the fight could have been stopped. Listen, I'm of two minds. Fighters are people who are quite often too tough for their own safety. Because you hear fighters say the same thing all the time, that they are willing to die in there. I'm willing to go in there and die. I will die in there. And you see fighters with broken jaws or broken arms or whatever it might be, and they continue to fight anyway. Just because they're too tough for their own safety, and that's when you need referees in their corners to start stepping in and tell them when to stop, or recognizing the signs of when it's right to stop. So most fighters are too tough for their own safety, and they're tougher than the average human being, which it gives them the ability to actually be a professional fighter. Because the vast majority of us couldn't even take one leg kick. I guarantee it. Having felt some leg kicks in my day, I guarantee it. We're not surviving those. Okay, But on the other side, I really do think that fighters need to finish the fight. Let fighters finish the fight. The story of the fight should not be that the referee stopped the fight. The story of the fight should always be let the fighter finish the fight. And in this case, look, Caio Borralho knocked him down, got on top, tried to punch him, and Jared Cannonier was conscious for most of that. So Caio Borralho kind of didn't finish him. I wouldn't have stopped the fight either if I was the referee. And I know a lot of MMA fans think that it could have been a stoppage and it was bad to let that continue. I think it was fine. Look, Jared Cannonier was still conscious. He was still defending himself for most of that. That is not the worst I've ever seen. I think people are very much trying to jump on and be defensive, but I think it was fine. I think it was absolutely fine. If the referee stepped in, I think I would have said maybe it was a little bit. Actually, if the referee stepped in, I would have said that was fine because of how bad the knockdown was. He was clearly unconscious when he was falling to the ground. He hit the ground and woke up then. But, in boxing, that would have been a knockdown. In kickboxing, that would have been a knockdown. I think that was fine to let the fight continue. Let fighters finish the fight is my attitude. But look, if you are the kind of person who's saying, no, that did not deserve to continue, that's absolutely fine. That is an okay thing. I don't disagree with you in any way, but I think letting it continue is fine. So what is next for Caio Borralho? He's going to move up into the top 10 a little bit more here. And what is so nice, we're finally starting to clean out some of these older guys at middleweight. I think the generation You are seeing a passing of the torch right now with Robert Whittaker losing to some of these top guys, Israel Adesanya losing to some of these top guys, and we got a little bit of fresh blood here, but it's not that these people are bad, it's just a change in generations. Those guys have been fighting at the top for 5, 6, 7 years now. Like, think about some of these wars that some of those older guys have had. Robert Whittaker was going to war 10 rounds against a prime Yoel Romero. These two guys are kicking each other's knees out from each other. That was what? 8, 7 years ago at this point? Think about Israel Adesanya going to war against a very motivated, a prime Kelvin Gastelum. And literally going in from round 4 to 5, he said, I'm willing to die in here for this fight. Those wars wear on a guy, and those were years ago. So it's just a little bit of a changing of a guard, but at middleweight, I'm really happy to start seeing some fresh blood get in there. I think welterweight, we're really starting to see some fresh blood. Finally, we're getting rid of, my grandparents' generation stagnating, sitting around at welterweight, doing absolutely nothing at welterweight. Finally, we get some new people at welterweight. But let's take a look at Caio Borralho's future in the middleweight division and what could be next for him. You have Nassourdine Imavov, you have Marvin Vittori's there, Brendan Allen is there, Paulo Costa's there. Man, Jack Hermanson, I guess, Roman Dolidze. This is what I mean of like that he's really an exciting addition to a lot of these people, because like he beats Paulo Costa, Marvin Vittori, he probably beats Jack Hermanson, no problem. I mean, if you just want to give him a highlight reel knockout, put him up against, I think, honestly, Paulo Costa or Marvin Vittori, because I think both of those guys being in the top 10 are ranked far too high. I've never been super high on either of those people as they struggle to make game plans or adjust during fights. They don't have those fight nerd skills. They have very impressive physical skills if you let them do their game. And if you don't let them do their game, they don't know what a plan B is. They don't know how to game plan for an opponent. I don't know what's next for him, but yeah, Caio Borralho, fast track him to a title shot as much as possible here. You got Khamzat Chimaev and Robert Whittaker fighting maybe for the number one contender position. You probably have Sean Strickland being there, so getting a little bit of fresh blood in there. The Caio Borralho would be really, really exciting. And just move him into the mix. So maybe a Nassourdine Imavov is just like the right pick. You can almost move him into a top 3 with a win, and it's a very meaningful fight at the same time. Let's move down the card here. We had a really exciting fight between Angela Hill and Tabatha Ricci. I love this fight. This was such a fun fight. These two were exchanging in the pocket, throwing tons of, volume of strikes, furious strikes, a flurry of strikes, trying to crack one another and throwing some interesting stuff as well. And then each one would initiate different clinching, duck under the punches, try to go for takedowns, just really mixing the martial arts as the fight is going. And it was a really exciting fight. But the rule is, if it goes to a decision, Angie Hill cannot win. We know that. That is just the laws from the MMA gods. Doesn't matter how close the fight was or if she deserved to win or not. I don't care. If it goes to a decision, Angie Hill just isn't going to get it done. And we all love Angela Hill. She is such an asset to martial arts. She brings so much personality to the sport. She's a great commentator, and she's a road dog for the UFC. She just fought 3 days ago. If you needed her this weekend, pick up the phone, and she is down to do it. Just an absolutely awesome stuff. But did Tabatha Ricci deserve to win this fight? Yes, I think so. I would have scored it for Tabatha Ricci as well. I think Angela Hill in rounds 2 and 3 may have landed a few better punches here and there, but I think Tabatha Ricci's volume combined with aggression was worth a little bit more. But I think it was a great fight either way. And I think it deserved fight of the night. They didn't get $50,000 bonus, but some really, really cool stuff here. Tabatha Ricci, I really like Tabatha Ricci. She had a knee that landed while exiting the clinch. No, it was a knee to counter a jab, and that was really cool. You saw a flying elbow landed from, she attempted a flying elbow, and that was super cool. Beautiful right cross landing for Hill as well. You had Angie Hill spinning back elbow and a hook in round 3. It was just so cool. And also some new techniques here and there where you had off of her back, she used what Khamzat Chimaev used against Gilbert Burns, which is just to give him a hell of a push off of your back. Think about how much you can do on an incline leg press. You can do a lot more than a squat, for example, because of the way, just all the way the muscles are put together there. So if you're on your back and your opponent's coming at you, just give them a hell of a shove from there. And that was really cool. So that's a little bit of a new technique that we're seeing slowly growing in MMA, especially landing it to someone's collarbone, just as Khamzat Chimaev was doing to Gilbert Burns. But yeah, really fun fight. If you haven't seen it, go out of your way to go find this fight because it's really, really fun. It's a great fight, incredible pace, incredible fury on it. I just absolutely love this one. Angela Hill started pretty late to MMA. She was a little bit older. I think she was like late 20s or something like that when she started. And it was just to stay in shape. So she joined a Muay Thai class just to stay in shape. And like, look at her now. She is one of the staples of the UFC and started as a person who just wanted to take a fitness class for fun kind of thing. Tabatha Ricci started when she was young in Muay Thai. I think she was 14, 15 years old, and she would later add jiu-jitsu and judo, and she is now a black belt in both, and she is quite a talented fighter. I think she struggled in the higher weight classes, mostly won in the strawweight division now, but really do move up. And one thing that I liked is that Angela Hill is ranked, I think, number 3 for significant strikes of all time. Super cool. Let me look it up here. Yeah, Angela Hill is ranked number 3 of all time for significant strikes landed. The only people ahead of her are Sean Strickland and Max Holloway. But really, what is so significant about that is that most of these people are within the same realm. They're in the arena together here. Max Holloway at number 1 is so far ahead of the pack, right? So Sean Strickland is number 2 at about 2,000. Max Holloway has 3,300 significant strikes landed. He is so far ahead of the pack. You have Joanna Jędrzejczyk at number 7. Max Holloway has 2 times as many strikes landed as Joanna Jędrzejczyk. He is so far ahead of the pack when it comes to significant strikes landed. You know, like he had such an incredible run at the top of featherweight and even had a great run in his little lightweight fights that he had. He had the close fight against Dustin Poirier and then the incredible fight against Justin Gaethje. Amazing stuff. Now he's coming back to 145 and he's got a hell of a fight in Ilia Topuria. But he had those amazing wins over people like Jose Aldo, went to war against people like Conor McGregor. Great fights here and there. Even if he doesn't have the titles as the Anderson Silvas and the Demetrius Johnsons and the George St. Pierres, this guy has everything that you want in a greatest of all time. He's in that pack where we talk about the Dan Hendersons and the Vitor Belforts, and that these people really matter for the history of MMA. They may not be the number 1, 2, or 3, but my God, dude, these people matter. And Max Holloway is top of that list. And he can still make a run for greatest of all time, in all honesty. But just the stories of these fights and those unforgettable moments that he creates in the octagon. I mean, Max Holloway doesn't get enough love, and that's saying a lot. Let's move forward here. Michael Morales gets a impressive win, defeating the gatekeeper at welterweight over Neil Magny. He's 6-0 in the UFC, and this young man is 17-0 overall in MMA. Just got a first-round knockout. He is a training partner of Bilal Muhammad, and you can really see that in his impressive takedown defense. Now, he had a spinning back elbow from the clinch to set up his finish. Spinning back elbow from the clinch. He had an opponent on his back and was able to land a spinning back elbow. Remember what we were just talking about with that Khamzat Chimaev Gilbert Burns push off of the back. Every once in a while, you have some really cool new moves that fighters will apply, and then all the other fighters in their gym will begin learning that move because it's clearly very important and clearly very effective. I think the spinning back elbow from the clinch if you have a man on your back, try a spinning back elbow, and I think that's going to be the next real big development that we see in MMA. But Michael Morales really keeping it fresh here at welterweight, getting the old blood out of welterweight and getting the new blood in, and it's just so exciting to see a young man like this who has what it takes to move into the next level. And look, you got some old dudes like Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, Gilbert Burns, Stephen Thompson. Those people are still there in the top 10, but like they're 105 years. Like those are old dudes who've been around forever. Look at the young guys. You got Shavkat Rakhmonov, you got Jack Della Maddalena, you got an Ian Mikado Gary, you got a Sean Brady, and then you're going to be having a Michael Morales moving into that mix as well. So I don't know what's next for him, but there is no bad matchup here. Like, I want to say Jack Della, maybe Ian Mikado Gary. I don't know. Maybe Sean Brady. So many fun matchups here for this young man. Or maybe another builder matchup. You know, I think he is going to be moving into that top 15 range in the next little while here. Maybe top 10. Maybe another builder matchup with someone ranked lower than him. I don't know. But I'm tuning in for it because, my God, is that kid ever good. Gerald Meerschaert is able to submit Edmund Shabazian. And It's an interesting thing, isn't it? That Gerald Meerschaert, is now one of the top-ranked fighters in UFC history for submission wins. He's up there with your Charles Oliveira's and your Damian Maia's, and in the middleweight division, he's ahead of Anderson Silva. And it really puts into perspective the old adage when they started tracking UFC events and putting records together, in that these wins really, these numbers don't mean much without context. If you got Gerald Meerschaert maybe having more submission wins than Damian Maia, in the middleweight division, he has more submission wins than Anderson Silva. He's up there with Charles Oliveira. Do these wins mean anything without context? Not really. They're just numbers. Anyway, Gerald Meerschaert gets beat up for 2 rounds. He's getting dropped. He's falling down. He's punches to the head and he's going down. Punches to the body and he's going down. And honestly, Edmund Shabazian could barely miss. He was really good. He was landing a pretty high percentage landing, but whether it was low punches or high punches or whether it was body kicks, pretty much everything was landing and he was controlling the fight. And then, loses. Just Gerald Meerschaert submits him. I don't have a ton to say on it other than that's middleweight. What a division here. Let's talk about Wang Cong, because she looked absolutely awesome. This was her first fight in the UFC. I think she was just coming off Road to UFC. In Road to UFC, she got a round 1 submission victory. And then here in the big UFC, she was signed. And then her debut in the UFC, she won with 1 punch in 62 seconds into the fight. She defeated Victoria Leonardo, 1 punch, knockout. And it was a clean punch. Wang Cong is a Chinese athlete with an incredible background in kickboxing. She was competing in Kunlun against the top of the world. She has a draw against all-time great Tiffany Van Soest, and she has a win over Cyril De Jong, who is an all-time great, and she also has a win over former UFC champion Valentina Shevchenko. So Valentina Shevchenko, if you have a win over her in kickboxing, that is very good, but her significance is bigger in MMA. But Wang Cong still has a win over her, and a win that you can go find on YouTube quite easily, as Kunlun really did put it out there. She was a champion in Kunlun, which was a kickboxing organization in China, and I believe she also had a bunch of professional boxing fights that maybe aren't showing on her record at this time, but she has a very extensive striking background and now in the UFC, and she is a breath of fresh air in that women's flyweight division, because my God, it is so exciting. She is aiming for Valentina Shevchenko. She says, I already beat her in kickboxing. I want to beat her again and show the world that I'm better. Can she beat her? It's hard to say of how fast a kickboxer switching to MMA can develop their ground game. And there's not, some fighters do really, really well to do counter work, like Alex Pereira, and other people are less successful, like a Gokhan Saki. So it's not a hard and fast rule. Maybe she can develop a lot of the groundwork, but look, I'm not saying that she's going to out-wrestle a Tatiana Suarez or anything like that. That's just simply not going to happen. There's just no way that's going to happen. But is she going to outstrike someone like a Jessica Andrade? Oh my God. Yes. Get Wang Cong and Jessica Andrade in there. That is a fun little fight. Is she going to outstrike a Rose Namajunas? Probably. Rose will have to probably start looking at her B game, which is her impressive clinching and grappling. And Rose probably wins that fight based on what I've seen between these two. But what I'm saying is, Wang Cong, move her into that top 10. She is a breath of fresh air in this division, getting first round knockouts, getting first round submissions. It's just so exciting. Let's get her in there. This is such fun stuff. It just stuff that makes it fun again. And she shows up dressed like the Joker to weigh-ins. How fun is that, guys? This is super fun. Someone you definitely need to keep an eye on is Wang Cong. And she got a $50,000 bonus the next day. She complained on Instagram and was like, WTF, I'm so mad I didn't get a bonus. And Dana White in the comments said, don't worry about it. Hey, you got it. You got a $50,000 bonus. Congratulations. You got it. So good for her. And she's coming off this fight uninjured. She has no issues. She wasn't hit at all. So you can probably step in next week. So let's keep this climb going. We are on the Wang Cong train. Also this week, a ton of stories have come out with Francis Ngannou, in that he is going to be fighting Renan Ferreira later this year, October 19th, live from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And all of us are super excited for this one. I cannot wait for this one. The real big story that people were latching onto was that Renan Ferreira had said some rude things at the press conference. For example, he said, Like I know that you've had a hard year with your son passing away, but I'm going to be the biggest problem for this year. It was either a mistranslation or that's not what he intended. It's very much hard to say. It's not clear to us what's going on with that. But yeah, he did walk it back and say, I apologize. I didn't mean that. And other people from Brazil said that wasn't really an accurate translation. Francis Ngannou's son passed away earlier this year, and that's incredibly sad. His son was 15 months old, and he was able to keep Kobe, his son, a secret. And with that kind of loss of life, he said, like, I couldn't stay motivated to get in the gym, and I thought about retiring from fighting altogether. And that's an extremely sad thing, but he said, I wanted to do this fight against Renan Fierro. And so this is his drive and motivation. And it's a very sad thing for any parent to go through. But for him to do it in the public eye, he's doing long form interviews talking about this. And then he's going to press conferences and talking about this. And he's clearly emotionally unstable because of it. And that's very difficult to do. So I don't envy this position at all. But let's talk about Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou and what is the final word on this one. Look, back in the day, back in 2020, 2019-ish, Dana White said Jon Jones is asking for too much money to move up to heavyweight, so he's not going to move up to heavyweight. Also, around the same time, Dana White was saying Jon Jones is scared of Francis Ngannou. Look, nobody wants to fight Francis Ngannou. So that's what the line he was saying. And now he's changing what he said. He's now saying Francis Ngannou was scared of Jon Jones. Look, it's a stupid line because professional fighters at the highest level are not scared of anyone. It just doesn't add up at all. Look at Francis Ngannou. This guy stepped into a sport where he had no experience, and he fought Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, back-to-back world champions in boxing. And then he suffered 2 losses, so he gets back in the ring against a towering 6'8" knockout machine in Renan Fierro. He fought Stipe Miocic. He fought Derek Lewis. He fought everyone. He fought Alistair Overeem and didn't even know who he was, to be honest with you. He fought all these absolute monsters and wasn't scared of any of them. You're going to pretend that he's scared of Jon Jones? And Jon Jones on the other side, he fought a prime, Rampage Jackson, Shogun. He fought Lyoto Machida. He fought Rashad Evans when it really mattered. And then he moved up to heavyweight. Jon Jones isn't scared of anyone. It's such a stupid line that we all see right through. Look, Jon Jones isn't scared of anyone. Francis Ngannou's not scared of anyone. That's it. So let's have a reasonable discussion. Look, Jon Jones didn't want to move up to heavyweight, or he was asking for too much money, and the UFC didn't want to pay him. Now, when Francis Ngannou is gone, Jon Jones is willing to move up to heavyweight, and the UFC is willing to pay him probably half of what he was asking for, and that's fine. Francis Ngannou's not there anymore, but they can still make that fight. There's a very narrow window where Saudi Arabia throws a ton of money at it and gets it done. I don't know if the UFC would be willing to do that, but Dana White did change his tone a little bit. He said, I have great respect for those guys and what they're doing in Saudi Arabia, especially Turki Al-Sheikh, who is kind of behind, the combat sports success behind Riyadh season. So he changed his tone a little bit from going with Fedor of we do not co-promote at all to now saying we do not co-promote at all, but I have great respect for that guy. This isn't M1 and Fedor anymore. This is a different ball game that we're dealing with. So is there an opportunity for that fight? There is. It's a very small one, but there's more hope than there used to be. But what Francis Ngannou said was, look, they told me that Jon Jones didn't want to fight me. Back in the day, back in 2020, 2019, whatever it was, they said Jon Jones didn't want to fight me. I said I would like to fight Jon Jones, and they said, no, he's not interested in fighting you. Well, now things have changed because the promotion needs to change what they're doing. Here's the timeline. Francis Ngannou won the heavyweight title in 2021 and vacated it in 2022 after defending it. Jon Jones did not move up to heavyweight until 2023, and he wasn't busy in that time as well. He vacated his light heavyweight title and kind of sat around for a few years. Right now, Jon Jones doesn't have any fights booked, and Ngannou has taken 2 boxing fights, and then he has an upcoming fight in October in MMA. So it just doesn't add up that, Anyway, here's what in 2021, Dana White had said, we tried to work with Jon, and eventually we have to move on because realistically and in all honesty, Derek Lewis is the guy who deserves the fight. Derek Lewis is a heavyweight, and he beat Francis Ngannou. He looks good in his last couple of fights. He's ranked in the top 3. I think he deserves the fight. That's the fight that should happen. We'll just roll and do what we do. When Jon's ready, he'll let us know. Look, Jon Jones doesn't want to fight at heavyweight. They're going to say whatever they need to say to keep that promotion, to make sure that their guy gets a shine on. And right now, Dana White is really high on Jon Jones. They weren't high on him in the past when he was getting events canceled or whatever it was, when he had some picogram issues or he had very low testosterone, like questionably low testosterone. They have gone through hot and cold with him, but right now they're really pushing him as the GOAT. And in 2 months, they might change their minds about that. Cris Cyborg Santos will look to collect her 5th title in MMA, which is an incredible feat. She first won the Strikeforce title in 2009. She picked up the Invicta title in 2013, the UFC title in 2017, and then the Bellator title in 2020. Now, in 2024, she's looking to pick up the PFL title against Larissa Pacheco. Larissa Pacheco was the one who had the upset victory against Kayla Harrison. She's also beaten people like Julia Budd and Sarah Kaufman and people like this. But yeah, Cyborg Santos is just one of the all-time women of the sport. Like, she is number 2 all-time great. And if she beats Larissa Pacheco, she's still right in that mix of being number 2. Is she number 1? Well, I would say that she lost to Amanda Nunes, and those things do count for something. So, Amanda Nunes is number 1. But either way, going for a 5th world title in MMA is unheard of. It's not often that someone has the longevity to travel around to different promotions and pick up multiple titles. So it's a very cool and impressive thing. Last week at PFL 9, we had some really cool, exciting storylines coming out that I want to talk about here. I really like this welterweight division that they've put together here, because you have Shamil Musayev and Magomed Umalatov in the finals. Both of them won. They beat Murad Ramzanov, who was a veteran of one championship, and Naaman Gracie, who was a veteran of Bellator. Shamil Musayev, he is coming in at a perfect 17-0. And then you have Magomed Umalatov, who is coming in at a perfect 17-0. So you got a perfect record versus a perfect record. Someone's O has got to go in these PFL finals here with $1 million on the line later this year. On the other side of the brackets, you have the striker, featherweight. Brendan Loughney is going to be taking on Timur Kisiev. Now, I believe Timur is one of the students of Khabib Nurmagomedov. Previous background in combat sambo. Brendan Loughney is a very dangerous English striker. I mean, I got to pick Timur in this one. That's my boy. Now, and there was a story that blew up earlier this week in which a Misfits boxing person had a TE ratio of 34-1. I'm going to break down what all this means, because there seems to be a little bit of misinformation about, what all that kind of means. And we've had these ratios come up in the past, and sometimes they're not relevant, and sometimes they are extremely relevant. So he had a 34-1. I forget his name, but Misfits Boxing is the one that has like OnlyFans stars on it and stuff like that. They're always the one that have the very interesting weigh-ins. Anyway, so he had 34-1. He was a bodybuilder, tried boxing. I don't think my understanding is that he's ran away from tests in the past and just pretend that he's all natural. But now he's boxing and tested 34-1. He pushed back and said, no, it's fake. It was a false test, and didn't provide any proof. Anyway, so 34-1, he's suspended for quite a while now. A normal human adult can vary anywhere from about 0.7-1 to about 3-1 is the very range. Like, even 3-1 is pretty high for a normal adult doing natural things. And what this is measuring, the 1 is epitestosterone and the 34 is testosterone. So that's how much testosterone is in your body. A normal adult is going to be 1-1. Women are a little bit lower, but men are normally going to be about 1-1. And a lot of people were commenting and not quite understanding the nature of anabolic steroids. So most of the time when we find evidence of performance enhancing drugs in an athlete's body, we're finding the smoking gun. We're not finding the gun. We're not finding the bullet. We're not finding the evidence. We're just finding evidence and trying to use logic to work backwards. So for example, this guy did not test positive for steroids. So you can't say that there were no steroids in his, you can say that there was no steroids on this system, but based on the testosterone, he had to be on something. All steroids don't do any magic in the person's body. All that they do is find different ways to increase a person's testosterone, which will help increase their growth rate when it comes to recovering muscles. So think of it that way. If someone's on Turnabol or whatever it might be, which is the old Soviet stuff, they're just finding different ways to increase their testosterone. It's not doing some magic work with the muscles. You're just finding different ways to increase testosterone. That's why TRT was so cool. And fun back in the day for a couple of fighters. And same thing with smoking guns, like Brock Lesnar never ever tested positive for steroids in his system, but he did have estrogen blockers in his system. Because when you load up your body with performance enhancing drugs and you increase your testosterone, your body is going to try to balance it back out again, where it's going to not produce testosterone because there's already enough testosterone in your body, right? We're talking 34-1. You don't need more testosterone. It's going to end up producing a bunch of estrogen to try to balance you out. And it's going to stop producing testosterone. So again, Brock Lesnar never tested positive for steroids, but it was the smoking gun where we found in his body estrogen blockers. Someone like Jon Jones has had really interesting stuff where sometimes he tests positive for steroids. He has actually never tested high for testosterone, but he has tested alarmingly low testosterone levels. Where sometimes he's testing positive for steroids and sometimes he has low testosterone levels. And keep in mind of what I was just talking about, if your body's going to stop producing testosterone when you're on steroids. He had alarmingly low levels of like, even if he was, I think the person who was talking about it was on Sherdog a few years ago, even as a woman, he would have had alarmingly low testosterone. And then you have people in the past, Chael Sonnen, I believe was 14-1. And then I want to say Alistair Overeem was 16-1. And then Jon Jones at one point was like 0.5-1. Just this weird numbers. It's super odd stuff. But yeah, anyway, this boxer comes in at 34-1. And steroids are one of those things where I think it would be best to not have it in the sport because we're not hitting a ball farther. We're not running faster. We are hitting a person's skull harder. You know, it's not your standard sport where we're throwing balls into nets and doing stuff like that. You're playing with a person's life. And so having an unfair competitive advantage is potentially a travesty, potentially a really bad thing to have against someone when you can do damage, life-altering damage against your opponent. But at the same time, you have to look at the evidence and see that testing hasn't worked and testing has only benefited the higher-up fighters. One thing that Luke Thomas was talking about was that when you bring in testing, fighters still get away with it. And athletes are always going to be one step ahead of people who are testing. And the testing agencies have said that as well. It's like often we don't know what we're looking for because a lot of the stuff that these people are doing, we have never even heard of before. So we don't know what we're looking for. So they're always going to be one step ahead. They're always going to find impressive ways to cheat. But when you outlaw performance enhancing drugs, the higher ups, the wealthier athletes will be able to afford better drugs. Whereas the low-end athletes can't afford those same drugs. So they either have to support their competitive disadvantage by having bad steroids like Turnbull, or, which punishes them because it's going to show on a test, or fight naturally and you're not fighting on the same level. But then when you don't have testing, it's a little bit more even. So ultimately, I would say it's probably best to get rid of it, but the testing doesn't seem to work as intended. USADA was the one that the UFC used for 10 years or so there. WADA is kind of their competitor, and WADA recently had a report that said that USADA was doing sponsored corruption, essentially. Because what USADA allows people to do is, if you catch me on steroids, I'll snitch out and give you information, and then I'm clean. And what WADA says is like, what the hell? Like, you can't just let athletes knowingly compete with performance-enhancing drugs in their system because they traded information with you. That is corruption still. That is absolutely corruption, you know? And it's something that we've dealt with in MMA since Sean Shirk's time of like, what is the right idea here of what should we be doing? But I think ultimately, like we were talking about with the knockdown of Caio Borralho and Jared Cannonier, is that fighters need to be protected in some way. And I think cracking skulls with fists is a dangerous sport. It's dangerous enough without giving some guys a little bit of a competitive advantage. But on the same, flipping that same coin over, testing hasn't worked. And it's made things harder. People at the top stay more competitive. People at the top can afford better stuff. But yeah, Luke Thomas just had a steroid expert on, and he definitely knows his stuff. But he was saying most MMA fighters probably aren't on PEDs. It's quite rare. Because what the standard steroids do that you saw, especially in competitive weightlifting and things like that, wouldn't really benefit an MMA fighter. They need different areas to really benefit. I forget what the term is, but the thing that TJ Dillashaw was doing and Michael Cycler was doing, where you oxygenate the blood and then put it back in. That stuff is incredibly valuable for MMA fighters because it's not making you stronger. It's making your muscles work faster, longer without getting tired. But that science is incredible. But yeah, it's really hard to say. And wherever you land in the argument, I'm curious. It's not a right or wrong thing. There's no right or wrong argument here. There's just different arguments. Let me know what you think here. I know some people say like let them juice and other people say absolutely not. And I'm really not sure what the correct answer is, to be honest with you folks. But you let me know what you think is best and where I'm wrong here. All right, so let's take a look at what's coming up next week. Oh man, I have no idea. One championship? No, that's a little ways away. Maybe the PFL has something coming up. Man, what is coming up next week? There's no UFC? What is going on here? What are we going to do next week? Maybe there's some kickboxing? I just had a major story with Shingiz Alazov relinquishing his title in one championship. A major story on the main site, LowKick MMA. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it this Wednesday on Kick Weekly with Tim Wheaton here. So make sure to check that out if you want to get the full scoop on what's going on there and the conversation that I had with Shingiz Alazov. But he doesn't want to work with one anymore and has no ill will towards one championship. He wants to vacate his title and walk away, as he has wanted to do for at least a year now. There's even an interim champion in his division. He says like, yeah, cool, I want to go. But yeah, one is probably going to lock him down, put him in a little one jail alongside Panpayak and other people like that. Sage Northcutt is in the same prison at this point as well. But yeah, we'll keep developing. But yeah. If you want to tune in Wednesday, that's going to be on the Calf Kick Sports Network. Now, folks, my name is Tim Wheaton with LowKick MMA. That's almost an hour. That's almost enough time. Folks, I appreciate you joining me. We'll see you same time next week.